And I was like, wait, like, how can you say this? That's how can you give excuses and stuff? Within 2 weeks, people were discussing internships, resumes, referrals, and I was like, guys, we just came here. Like, I later came to know that, oh, like, you can convert your MS to a PhD if you work with a professor and stuff like that. As I said, I wasn't the best at like lead code and stuff, and that sort of came back to bite me. I wish I'd done more side projects in my undergrad. I did not do many, and during that time, I did have this thought that should I apply for a PhD, MS plus PhD, MS. But at that point, I did not. The one thing I looked at a lot was the courses. There are three things. One is something that interests you, one is something that you're good at, and I had written this down. One is some. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to our podcast show named Beyond Conversations, a podcast show which is for the students and by the students. Today, our guest is Rohit. Hi, Rohit. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience? Much for having me on this podcast. I have seen a few of your previous episodes and they are amazing. And about me, my name is Rohit Muzumdar. I currently work at Intel as a research engineer scientist. I'm based out of San Jose, California. And previously, I was at Georgia Tech for my master's. And before that, I was in Pune, India for my undergrad and my life before that. So that's my very quick introduction, and I'm sure we'll get into more as Sohan asks me interesting questions. Absolutely. So basically, this is my first podcast where I'll be covering, aspects of research, especially in computer science, and that too in machine learning, data science in detail. So I've picked up a couple of questions to ask Rohit, considering his comprehensive journey in different multiple fields, right? Be it education, be it experience, be it projects. So I just want to touch upon different aspects by, starting with your first point, that how did you get into data science and or artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how did your undergrad experience, your research experiences, your projects, or your work experience at HSBC as a software engineer initially, and then as a data scientist at a startup shape your career? Sure. So my very first tries with data science was a sort of bit accidental. So I remember very vividly, I was in my third year and I had taken courses like database management systems, operating systems, and stuff like that. And at that point, I had to set up a lot of like frameworks and stuff to just get started with all this. And I remember being very frustrated with just the setting up part. I'm like, okay, I'm just setting things up. When will I actually get to do the actual things? And around the same time, so I was from VIT Pune in India, and there we have something called as a major project, which lasts 3 semesters. So a third year last sem and fourth year 2 sems. So it was around the same time that we had to pick a major project and also choose an advisor for that. So I had heard of this professor called Dr. Mansi Patwardhan, and I knew that he worked in research and stuff like that. And I was like, let me try out this thing because this software engineering thing seems like a bit tedious to me. So, and plus she had really good credentials. So I wanted to work with good professors. So when we approached her with my team group, she suggested a few project ideas. And that was my first encounter with data science. So that project involved like developing like a semantic search engine. So what is a semantic search engine? So when you ask questions in Google, you get links. In a semantic search engine, you basically get answers. So this was the project, and that was based on things like word2vec, knowledge graphs, and stuff like that. So when I started that project, I realized that, okay, I enjoy this. This, of course, involves coding, but it involves more like reading papers, trying to build new ideas, new concepts based on previous research. And that seemed interesting. And that's how my journey started with data science and machine learning. And
That's
so this was my whole of my fourth year. And that project was very successful. During that time, our advisor, Mansi Patwardhan, she was transitioning from VIT as a professor to a researcher at Tata Research Development Center in Hadapsar, Pune. And
okay.
I was like, oh, like people can do this for a living. They don't have to like just do Java software engineering. So we all had gone to TRDDC. That was a great experience. So when I got exposed to all of that, I really started falling in love with this idea. Then I started to understand what research really entails, what writing papers is, and how much of a Herculean effort that is. So all that was my exposure to that. However, during
my placement season, which happens in fourth year, we had
Yeah.
this very funny rule that once you sit for a company and you get selected, you can't like apply for other
Reapply.
companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I should have been more cognizant of this, but I sat for the very first company that came, which was HSBC Software Development.
HSBC.
And yeah, and I got selected, and I was like, okay, that's amazing, but shit, now like I can't do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I got into HSBC. And at HSBC, I was doing mostly software development. And the funny thing that happened is we were 100 new grads at HSBC. And out of those 100 new grads, it so happened that 9 of us were chosen for mainframe work, which happens in COBOL.
Okay.
And when I heard that, I was so disappointed because I was like, okay, if I'm not doing research, I would at least I could do like Java, Spring Boot development stuff and be doing trending stuff. But this was like going backwards in my career. Forget being stagnant or forget not having to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
what I really wanted to. So that's what happened at HSBC. And for like 1 year, I was like, oh my God, what am I like the company's amazing. I love the people there. But personally, for me, I was like,
The work.
what am
Yeah.
I doing? Yeah, I did not really enjoy it so much. That's when I started looking at other options. I remember being on LinkedIn all day, trying to find jobs, trying to find, data analytics, ML startups in Pune. Um, and that's when I encountered Fruit Research, the startup which I later joined. Uh, so I applied for that startup. I interviewed, and I remember the interview process also being so much fun because they had given me a take-home assignment, and I had to come up with different ideas or strategies to solve those ML problems. So I applied for that, got in, and that's how my journey at that startup began, where a- got exposed to a lot of like ML data science problems.
Got it. Got it. So again,
Yeah,
that was a very comprehensive answer, right? But then, as
yeah,
a third year student or a second year student, because that's when people start talking about these terms, right? First year is usually
yeah,
pretty chill, like you just have to focus on the generic academics, and then you don't have much to do. But then your second, third, and
right.
fourth year, you start getting serious about that one domain to pick, or multiple domains in software in general to pick, and then start working on them, right? So
Right.
how does one filter out, like, filter out the domains and then select one or select multiple out of a lot of domains again? And then at the same time, how do they approach data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning with a project oriented approach? Because again, one of the complaints or the things that is being raised very frequently by the students these days is that the projects that everyone makes are very similar, it's very redundant, and it's always
Yeah,
done by someone else. But when I hear
right.
your experience, right, I think, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but being guided by someone who was genuinely interested and working in that subject and was mentoring you on your final year project for 1.5 year, like, was helpful, right? So how does
Yeah.
one implement all of those things and then begin their journey?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and there are lots of aspects to this. One is, as you said, finding the right mentor, because when you're in college, it was the same with me. Uh, like, we are pretty disillusioned sometimes. We have a fair idea of what's going on in the industry, but not really, because we are not really working so deeply in the industry or in the academia
Exactly.
field, right? So I think finding the right mentors is a huge, huge deal, and that's what really helped us. So if you know someone who's working on cutting edge thing, I think you can just approach them. Maybe you won't get to work on. Uh, so there are two aspects. Of course, if you get to work on the cutting edge project, then that's a cherry on the cake. But if not, at least you're mentored by someone who knows the field deeply. So
Exactly.
that is one thing. And you asked about projects. So how in hindsight, I think about projects is in two ways. One is leisure or like hobby side projects, and one is compulsory projects. Compulsory projects
Mm.
are the one which the college asks you to do. For example, this
Yeah,
major project of mine,
the academic
uh,
ones.
the academic ones. So these compulsory projects you can choose in fields which are trending, which have a lot of scope, uh, and most importantly, which give you results, right? Because if it's a compulsory thing, then in the end, what matters is if you deliver or not. Of course, if you learn in the process, that's amazing, of course, but you need to deliver. So when you're
Correct.
choosing these compulsory projects, you can focus on these things. Uh, and if it so happens that in these compulsory projects, you start liking the domain and everything, then that's just fantastic. But for your
Exactly.
side projects, you can actually do what interests you. Uh, so for example, right now I find myself gravitating a lot towards social science, like applying computing and ML problems to social science domain. uh, so like maybe I'll start researching on that, and you can look at these hobby projects as a very exploratory thing, and you should assume that, if this doesn't give me results, at least I'm learning and I'm doing something I like, because you're doing it in your free time, right?
Correct.
So in terms of projects, that's how I would like to think. Like, one is compulsory and one is leisure. One is exploratory, the leisure one, and the other one is more results oriented. And of course, if you get
Correct.
results in the leisure one, again, that's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, you did. And,
yeah,
because even when I'm not someone who is especially working in these domains, right? But I still collected a lot of things from my undergrad, and I think I can position myself better in the future with respect to academic
right,
projects and your leisure projects. That is an
right.
interesting answer. Yeah.
Yeah, and something interesting that happened is the major project that I mentioned. It had to
Mm-hmm.
do with NLP, natural language processing, where
Yeah.
we were using word to vec and phrase to vec. Right now, it's all really old, but this was 2015, 2016. So that time it was pretty
Yeah.
trendy.
Yeah.
So I personally am very interested in languages, linguistics, and so on. Like, I remember when I was in school, others were more interested in math, science, and I used to be interested in like languages and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it only accidentally happened that NLP dealt with language and like linguistics and stuff. So that was like an accidental match. But if something like that happens, if you're interested in video games, then maybe computer vision might interest you,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. If you're interested in stocks, or if you're interested in finance, then you can choose domains which are applicable to financial ML and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So another tip, yeah.
Exactly. So either you chase your curiosity or you build on top of your curiosity or try to connect the dots between both of them.
Yeah, somewhere the twain shall meet, and that will be amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So this
Yeah,
was an interesting answer again. And talking about learning or ensuring your learning curve while working on these leisure projects, right? So like for your
yeah,
academic projects, which are mandatory, like you said, the results matter more. Learning is secondary in that. But when you are
right,
working on your side projects, learning is the only thing. If results happen, that's like a miracle sort of a thing, right? So when you are
correct.
learning, what was your approach? Like, did you just simply start with research papers about that topic, or did you take up courses? Like, basically, what I'm trying to ask is, was it a bottom
Sure,
up approach or a top down approach? That was one thing. And one
sure.
other thing that I would want to ask with respect to the time that you devote to one particular project, because at like you mentioned, you were doing your graduation in 2015, 2016, right? So the time was different back then. And today,
Right.
what I see, at least in my batch or my juniors, is particularly the thing that they want results quickly. So like
Yeah.
you when you're working on a project, they won't give as much as time that you did. Probably there are a few students who do it, obviously, but I'm talking about the general
Right.
crowd, right? So
General.
they'll just dedicate like 2 to 3 months for a project, even if it's a side project, and they expect that they'll know everything and they just want to append it to the resume. So what was your mindset, firstly, about learning, like top down, bottom up, research papers, courses, and secondly, about the time that you are dedicating to your side project, not just during your undergrad, but even during your masters and currently now that you're working?
Sure. So during my undergrad, I was a very confused soul. So I can speak more about my grad school experiences. And to answer your question, it was more of a bottom-up approach. Like, maybe we can speak about this when we come to the grad school part, but just in a nutshell, I chose courses which interested me. So again, things like social computing, uh, text mining, natural NLP, and stuff like that. I chose these things, and then when you take action, then you start seeing options around you, and then
Correct.
amongst those options you choose what you like, and you hope that it leads to something. And I think once
Yeah.
you like keep taking action, things lead to somewhere. So for me, it was more of a bottom up approach. I wish I had done more side projects in my undergrad. I did not do many. So that is one thing. And regarding time, right, people want quick results. And that is completely true. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that in 2015, LinkedIn wasn't that big, social media, Twitter wasn't that big. So
Correct.
I wasn't really exposed to a lot of people doing something similar or something different. So I was
Correct.
sort of in a bubble, and I didn't really know what was going on. But
Correct.
you are so right. Like now, if I start something, and if I just go on Twitter where I follow all these ML people, I'd be like, oh shit, they've already done this. Oh, this person did it when they were like 22. What am I doing right
Exactly.
now?
Yeah.
So that is true. You will feel that, but in the end, you have to keep on doing something, right? So no matter what, if you keep taking the correct steps, even in a project that is not giving you instant results, you'll learn something. You'll get some results. So I think that does count, especially in when you like interview for jobs and stuff like that. Like people understand this. Like when you ask me the question, let's say I was an interviewer, like I would know this, right? I would know that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are in a certain batch and your peers would be doing the same thing. So I think people understand this. So I feel like people shouldn't take too much pressure of like trying to be too unique, because there is
Yeah.
only so much limited options available.
Yeah. Yeah. First, you like this is something that I've heard. Like you first replicate the grids and then you build on top of it. Like that's when you add your flavor when you get good at replicating. So I mean that's one of the things that students can probably use.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the end, sorry, at the beginning, you should know how the basic thing works, right? Uh,
Exactly.
so let's say I'm building, we can take an analogy of an ML model, right? If we need to have a baseline first, you need to like apply something as simple, but something as bad as perhaps logistic regression to just see like what the situation is. So
Yeah.
you can start that way. And then, as I said, as you keep on exploring things, you will find threads, and you can like, like take those threads and move further.
Build further. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So then again, like, now we move to the next part of the episode, which is about your interest in research and that too in these fields of data science, AI, and ML, right? So what I can
Sure.
infer from your journey so far is that it was that BTech project that, instilled that fire in you to pick that particular
Yeah.
domain. And as you were going through the project, you realized that research is something that you actually like. Then you worked at this company, then you realized that, okay, this is not the job that I want. I would want a more research oriented sort of a role. Then you joined a startup where you were
Yeah.
a data scientist for 1 year, and
Yeah.
then you moved to your master's. So like when did the transition from like surety about like, okay, this is the career that I want to pursue, like the research career that we're talking about, when did that kick in? Because again, I see a lot of people in my undergrad who are in their final year who want to pursue a research career ahead, but they don't know a path. Because out there you see a lot of videos, a lot of resources for cracking this and this placement for this and this company, and there is a generic path to it, right? I mean, it's obviously a lot of hard work, but there is a generic path. But especially in India, no one talks about research that extensively with that clearer picture, right? So I would just want
True.
you to paint a picture for students by sharing your journey as to how do you get clarity that, okay, research is something that I want to do in the future.
Sure. So that's a great question. So when I started working at this startup, Fruit Research, I did not have the clarity that ahead I want to do research only. I did not have that
Mm-hmm.
much clarity, but I knew that I liked this and I would be happy if I stuck to this. Uh, and I was also very happy with like applied research. So like a lot of the stuff that we did at Fruit Research, it wasn't exactly writing papers and stuff, but we were applying ML research, data science research. So I like that aspect also. So when I started working at Fruit Research, I realized that, okay, this is a very, very huge field and I would love to learn more in this regard. Plus, my mentor there, who was also the founder, Mr. Amit Gautam, he is an amazing person. He was really like generous in telling me a lot of information and just like mentoring me in general. So that's when I had the idea of perhaps applying for masters abroad, especially in the US, because here the research is really good, especially in the universities and stuff. And I'm sure now in India and other countries also it's
Yeah.
becoming good. But at that time, at least, I knew that it was really good here. So as I was working at Fruit Research, I was parallel looking to apply for masters, and that's when I started applying for roles here. And during that time, I did have this thought that should I apply for a PhD, MS plus PhD, MS, but at that point, I did not. First of all, beggars can't be choosers, so I didn't really have like I didn't know for sure that I would get into a PhD program, right? And you always have the option of later converting an MS to a PhD
MS to
or doing
PhD.
a
Yeah.
PhD, correct, or doing a PhD after you have done MS. So I'm like, let me take it easy. Let me not commit to such a huge monumental task right away.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, let me just apply to MS programs. And while doing so, another thought was that, oh, like I'm working in data science. I love this area. Should I just apply to MS in data science?
Yeah.
Or should I apply to like a more blanket course like MS in CS? And when I spoke to my peers who were already in the US, they were like, when we apply for jobs and all, just the fact that we have taken CS helps us uh, get at least shortlisted for an interview for software engineering roles. Uh,
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, that makes sense. So just for that namesake to have that CS as the blanket degree, I applied for MS in CS mostly. Because the fact of the matter is, once you come here in US universities, you can really choose your courses. You can make what you want of your masters. So I can very well come here and take all analytics, ML, data science courses, but have a CS degree. Of course, I'll have to do those compulsory few courses like
Core courses. Yeah.
algorithms and core courses like operating systems, but I'll still have like a choice. So that was my motive behind choosing MS in CS. Except at one university, which was CMU, where I applied for the data analytics program. Everywhere else, I applied for MSCS.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was coming to that question, right? Again, because a lot of students have this question before applying to their masters. So the first question is like MS plus PhD or just MS, especially if they are inclined towards research. And secondly, like, do
Right.
they choose a broader course like computer science, or they should go into a niche field like data science? So I guess you answered both of the questions here, and
Yeah.
I mean that was particularly insightful. So
I also have another thing to
yeah,
add, if you don't mind. So
yeah, sure,
I think you also mentioned that like applying after taking work experience,
exactly,
like if that
yeah,
made a
yeah,
difference. And at that time, I didn't really think or strategize that much. But in hindsight, I would like to like tell everyone that I'm so glad I
yes,
worked for 2 years, because the perspective I gained in those 2 years, just by sheer because of like growing up by age, and also because of being exposed to software engineering
exactly,
industry as well as data science industry, I knew
yeah,
what not to do. I knew what courses I don't want to take for sure, even if I didn't know
yeah, yeah,
what I wanted to do. uh,
yeah,
so I think that exposure really helped me. It gave me a lot of perspective. Had I come directly after my undergrad, I would have followed the herd mentality, because when you're really young, you're scared and you don't know
yeah,
what to
yeah,
do, and you want to like stay safe in terms of your financial, job, and mental health aspects.
yeah, yeah.
So I had the heart to take a few risks, if I can call them so, when I came for my
Mm-hmm.
masters. So I'm really glad I worked for at least 2 years, and ideally I would like to advise people, if they can, and if they want
Yeah,
that clarity, if they're not sure, then they can work for 2 years. If you're sure, then of course just come. You will have more time later on. So yeah.
exactly. Yeah, no, I was coming to that question, right? Because a lot of my mentors, especially with the ones that I've done podcasts with, even they have advised me the same for my higher education and masters. They have basically told me that if you are clear about what you want to do, then definitely come here. But if you come here
Yeah.
without that clarity, then you will, have so many things on your plate and so many options to choose from, then you will not know what to choose. And especially because I'm pursuing management studies ahead, right? So, I mean,
Right.
they also told me that you need to be able to relate what they are teaching you with the things that you have done in your corporate or your internship experience. So that's
Work
one
ets.
other thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, this is one thing that I really like that you mentioned, that if you're not clear about what you want to do, you should at least be clear about what not to do. Like,
Right.
if you can at least eliminate those options and then come like pursue your higher education, I think that works out great. And yeah, the other point that I was trying to state is that I've seen a lot of people doing masters in computer science, like they choose that and then they transition into product management roles or they transition into product marketing roles. So the
Right.
sheer possibility that your masters can be so broad, and at the same time I've also seen students who like take up engineering management and then shift to computer science, just shows that
Yeah.
the like you have a lot of flexibility here, but then you just need to go there with that clarity of what is your career outcome that you are seeking from it.
Right. Yeah, and these things stem from very little little things we might not think about. So, for example, so I have been on the recruiting end when I was at NCR in Atlanta. So, like, since I have been an engineer, I know both worlds, SD and data science. But let's say there's a recruiter, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, rightly, so they do not know so much about this world, right? So they'll be like, oh, this person has done MS in data science. Should I like shortlist them for SD? Maybe not. Maybe let me play safe and like just take some other people who have
Yeah.
CS
Yeah.
on their profile, right? So it's a
Hmm.
very human thing, and it's no fault of theirs, but that's just how the world works. So trying to like expand your surface area of options, that's the only.
So, with this point, I would love to move towards your experience at Georgia Tech, and what are the schools that you applied to, if you remember? How did you shortlist, your schools, and eventually come to Georgia Tech? And
Sure.
how was your experience, both academic, extracurricular wise, and how did you grow as a researcher? So, I mean, this is a broad topic that we can cover, but then if we can just
Yeah.
start talking about your experience at Georgia Tech, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I do remember all the schools I'd applied to very vividly. I had applied to 10 schools.
That's great.
I can quickly name them if you don't mind. So if we start from the top, it was UMass Amherst, CMU, Columbia, Georgia Tech, UT Austin, uh, USC, Stony Brook, CU Boulder, uh, and I might be missing a couple. UCSD. So these were the schools I had applied to, and I had
Hmm.
the randomest criteria sometimes while applying. So I really can't stand the cold, and when you come
Got it.
here, especially if you live in the northern states, like trust me, it is really cold. So like
Yeah.
one criteria, this people might find it ridiculous, but that's what I thought that back then. So I didn't apply
Uh-huh.
to any of the northern schools like Michigan, UIUC, Wisconsin Madison. I didn't apply there. Then, of course, I had the very common mainstream criteria that people have of like safe, moderate, and ambitious. So for
Yeah.
me, USC and Stony Brook and Boulder were safe schools. That's what I thought at
Hmm.
least then. Georgia Tech, UT Austin, UCSD were my ambitious schools, and CMU, UMass Amherst, Columbia were all moderate.
Yeah.
And so there are some things which we all know that USC looks at pointers. Stony Brook also looks at like your academic profile. So I knew I would get in there. I got in there. I expected to get in into CU Boulder, but I did not, and I was like really shocked. So I don't know what happened. And of course, my topmost school was Georgia Tech, and I got in there. And I think you had asked what was the motive to apply behind for Georgia Tech. So the one thing I looked at a lot was the courses because once you come here, uh,
Hmm.
you need to
Yeah.
like do courses, right? Uh, and of course, you can look at professors and all, but the probability of you being able to actually work with a professor you actually want, like you don't know what factors. Maybe the professor doesn't have space, or they leave the school. Because, for example, the professor's name I wrote on my Georgia Tech SOP, he left Georgia Tech the day I landed. So anything
Okay.
can happen. So
Yeah.
I would say look at the courses when you apply, look at what they have to offer. Uh, and once you get into any school, like trust me, there are many professors and you will find your way. So I would say look more on those things than other like moving factors. Look on more like fixed factors. Um,
Hmm.
and the reason I applied to GT, especially, and I wanted to get in very strongly, was because they have 11 specializations. If you go to
Okay.
Georgia Tech's website, they have an amazing suite of like specializations,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I really like their social computing and ML specialization courses. HCI courses are amazing at GT.
Got
That's
it.
what attracted me, and yeah, and I applied, and yeah, I was
You
happy
got
to
it.
get in. Yeah,
Yeah. I had one question about research that I missed, right? So I again got this
sure.
question from a couple of my juniors and batchmates at the same time. When you are pursuing your research, right? Again, machine learning in general is a very broad field, right? And when you
Right.
pursue your research, there are a lot of topics inside machine learning that you might want to choose from, and then you want to do that. So how do you gain
Right.
clarity about what particular topic to focus on, or does that clarity come eventually? Like you got that clarity, let's say after your masters at Georgia Tech, or when did that align for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because I made many mistakes in this regard. So I can tell you some of my learnings. So back then, as I said, I I used to love linguistics, languages. So I thought, oh, NLP is my thing. I should like totally do this. But when I came here, when I came to Georgia Tech, I started taking courses and started doing research in NLP. And I realized that this is a very, very vast field. And especially if you want to do like core deep learning NLP research, you have to be really good at like linear algebra and really esoteric mathematical stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
realized that, okay, there are three things, right? One is something that interests you, one is something that you're good at, and I had written this down. One is something, just a sec, something that is not too crowded or something that is unique. So that these three
Yes.
aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I would say honestly, in hindsight, I would say focus more on something that you can actually do, because
Mm-hmm.
this deep learning, core deep learning stuff was something that is not too crowded, because not everyone can perhaps do it. It is interesting if you actually like it, but am I able to do it? Like at that point, at least I couldn't, and I realized that, okay, like, I should, because in the end, see, the world wants results, right? You can be like, oh, I tried this, but what did you deliver?
Exactly.
So initially I was of that thought, but later I realized that I need to produce results. So I started leaning towards things that I'm able to actually deliver at. And in that you will find things which are of interest to you, right? Like there are so many options. So that's how I would say people can go about choosing their niche area, especially because during a master's, that's just not what you need to do, right? You are in a whole new country, thousands of miles away from your family. uh, you have to do courses, you are in a visa, you have to search for internships, later you have to search for jobs, and you need to keep your mental sanity in intact.
Yeah.
So in all of this, if you're doing research which is not leading anywhere, then it can be really daunting.
Exactly.
So I would say like the North Star you can choose is like do something that you can actually be good at. And of course,
Exactly.
I mean, I'm saying this very easily, but it's a trial and test method, right? You
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
something, you realize if it's sticking. If not, you choose a path. So
Yeah.
it's not something you find out overnight. It took me
Exactly.
like 3 semesters to finally realize that, okay, this is like an ML domain I actually like. So yeah.
Yeah. So this was during your masters, right? That's when you figured out,
Yes.
like, yes. So before that, you've had around two plus one, 3.5 years of that experience, and plus 1.5 years at your masters, and then you realize, okay, that this is what you want to do. But again, I'll
Right.
collect some data points here from your
Sure.
journey so far, right? So I would just love to restate so that in case like any student misses it, so then he can always collect it from here. So the first thing is
Sure.
that having really good mentors, like you said that when you were working at Fruit Search, again, so you had a close association with the founder, and he was the one who was mentoring you, right? Secondly,
Yeah.
your project guide at your institute during your undergrad, like she mentored you very closely, and that's how you got ahead. So that's about mentorship. And about the recent
Correct.
point that you mentioned, right, about gaining clarity as to which domain to work in. So there I can infer just one thing, that you should get your hands dirty first, and then as you create momentum, that's when you realize what you want to do. Like it's basically like throwing spaghetti on the wall and then saying, like, what sticks. I think that's a
Yeah.
phrase that most of the people use when it comes to networking, also when it comes to, I guess, any career. This is a
Right.
one of the crucial mental models, because what I think is people spend a lot of time contemplating about what they want to do, but then not generate momentum. And
Correct.
as far as I have seen so far, the easiest way to generate momentum is to start with something that you're curious as a side project, and then
Right.
eventually you'll land into something that you never saw coming. And then when it comes, you're like, you trace back the path, and then you see, okay, everything aligned so well. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And the ability to reflect, right, and to structure your thoughts so well, like you mentioned, this matrix sort of a thing, right, where you have those three
Yeah.
parameters. I
Correct.
read about it somewhere, but I don't remember where exactly. But then this was very insightful for me as well, and for the listeners, I'm sure it must be insightful, because
Sure.
it's a very linear way to structure your thoughts and then gain clarity about what you want. Because again, that's what I'm saying, one of the things that I've seen around is that people just work. They don't take breaks to actually see what works for them and what does not. So these
Yeah.
are the points that I
Yeah.
recollected, and I can relate to it very well.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add to something, so we spoke about, like throwing the spaghetti and sticking and looking at what sticks. So like I've seen so many people journeys, like personally or even on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Not one journey has been completely linear. Like if you see many people's research profiles, like they have papers in random domains. So like what you see out, like on the outside, you will see that, oh, this person did these two things in the undergrad, then in masters was this. So you might feel it's linear, but they have tried so many things at the back end which we never saw, which never saw
Correct,
light of
correct,
the day, right? Like people who are
correct.
successful have tried way more things than people who like are sort of
Have
unsuccessful. They
failed, yeah,
haven't even
haven't, yeah,
tried, have failed at,
correctly.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
So we don't see all that. So a lot of people, trust me, have extremely non-linear journeys. They try hundreds of things. It's all about like just doing, just do something, I think.
Correct, correct.
um yeah.
So again, with respect to the context of research, right? How do you see people trying different things? Like, what is the thing that they have on mind, or what motivates them to try and research in a particular thing? Because again, that's not something that's very shallow. It takes a lot of time to come up with something concrete, like you mentioned, right? And it may
Right,
take several months, even semesters, to do one concrete thing. And like also you mentioned that everyone cares about the results that you're delivering through whatever you're doing.
right.
So from a researcher's mindset, how does navigating through that journey look like? Like, what's the why or the motivation of doing things?
That's a great question, and actually, the why can be about a lot of things. So, for example, I can relate that to my journey at Georgia Tech. So, the very first semester I started, again, I had in my mind that, oh, NLP, I like NLP and stuff. So, I approached a lot of professors, and in Georgia Tech, we have something called as special problems, which means you do research and you get credit for it. So, instead of taking a course, you like take research, and like those are the credit hours you spend on that, and you don't have assignments, but you basically are like a research assistant, or you like work for the professor. So so there I chose something which I thought would resonate me, which was NLP, and I did enjoy a bit of that, but later I started realizing that this is not giving results, so I need to like pivot. uh, Sorry, your question was that how does one choose? Sorry, I got lost.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
question was like, what's the why of doing things for a researcher? Like, one thing could be
Right,
that you're genuinely curious about that research topic and then you do it.
right.
But like you also said, there are researchers who are pivoting through different domains, and we see that it's a linear journey, but it's actually a very non-linear one. So how
Right.
does that shift happen so quick, and what's the mindset while doing that? Yeah, that.
I see. So I think a lot of research, like of course, it can happen. Like the why of things can be things you're genuinely curious about or interested in, but a lot of it honestly has to do with what you've done before. So let's say I've done like research in a particular domain. Like when you do research, let's say there's a circle, right, and you are towards the edge of that circle when you start doing research. So when you see that, oh, there are opportunities here which perhaps no one else is doing, then you want to take those because you want to move ahead in your career, right? So sometimes it's
Correct.
as simple as like, oh, I want a great career, more than like, oh, this interests me and stuff like that. So the why can honestly depend on a lot of things. For me, it depended a lot more than my interest later on. It depended more on things like, oh, I want to get a paper out of this, or I want to work with great professors, or I want to uh, work on a research problem that doesn't have too much, let's say, like deep learning theory, mathematical theory involved. So those are my whys, honestly. I wish I had like more amazing whys to tell you, but honestly, at that point, it was very like basic and
Yeah.
yeah, transactional. Yeah,
Got it. Got it. And then I also
yeah.
see that you've had a very like diverse experience in terms of your research assistantship at Georgia Tech. Like, how did that experience shape you? Because again, I think it was 1.5 semesters long. I mean, yeah, 1.5 years, sorry, long. Then how did
Yeah,
that exactly work out?
sure. So, so there's two things I would also like to speak quickly about teaching assistantships.
Yeah.
What happens is when I came to Georgia Tech, before coming, I had just emailed like a bunch of professors, like around 30, 40 professors asking for teaching assistantships. And when I came to Georgia Tech, I still hadn't gotten any. I was still in talks with professors, and people were asking me to like interview or do assignments and stuff. When I came there, like there was this one senior I remember very vividly. He was like, "Oh, you won't get an assistantship in like your first sem. Like nobody does that." And I was like, "Okay." So I just like listened to him. I was like, "Okay, makes sense. Maybe that's his experience." But because I had emailed so many professors, I did all those like side assignments for them. I actually got two
Mm-hmm.
assistantships. So
That's great.
like yeah, and I was like, oh, so this is completely opposite of what this person told me. So
Yeah.
although this is about teaching assistantships, I said this because I want to relate it to research assistantships. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so like you might feel that, oh, professors, why will they take me, like what do I have to offer and stuff, but I think uh, here it's very democratic, right? Like if you just email professors and you show them that you can do something, I think reaching out is like the first step. So you can just email professors and you can tell them what you have to offer, and you have to, like, again, increase your surface area. I emailed at least 40 professors for that. So someone will
Yeah.
say something, like something will lead to some other place.
Someone.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that is the thing. And coming back to your question about how my experience was, so I worked in two labs at Georgia Tech. One was the design and intelligence lab with Professor Ashok Goel. So they have at that time they had this virtual teaching assistant called Jill Watson, which was the world's first virtual teaching assistant. It was a
Oh.
world without ChatGPT back then, so it was really
Uh-huh.
fancy. And it was about question answering in NLP. And at that time, I was completely in this NLP zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, let me do this. So uh, I worked there, and I worked there for 2 semesters, and I had a great experience. Uh, and I'll speak about two things. One is, of course, the technical stuff that I did. I'll speak about that later. But more importantly, I think what that experience taught me was, because I had come from India and I had no, like, in India, like, research, at least at that time, was done very differently. So when
Mm-hmm.
I came here, working with Professor Goel in his lab, uh, just to be exposed to that ecosystem where, how meetings are conducted, how people come together, how they discuss, how they give their
Mm-hmm.
updates and stuff like that. That was extremely insightful. I remember very vividly there was this one meeting. It was like the peak of the semester, and this one PhD student was like, "Oh, sorry, I don't have many updates because I had this exam, so I didn't do anything." Then this one time, another person was like, "Sorry, my boyfriend was in town, so I didn't have much time to do anything." And I was like, "Wait, like, how can you say this? That's how can you give excuses and stuff?" But the
Yeah.
professor was so welcoming of all those things, and those little things I learned. I realized that, okay, like, here people know that, like, if you're sincere, you will work. They value you, and they understand that there is a life you have outside work. So these little things I learned a lot in that 1 year at DI Lab, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, coming to the technical side, uh, a lot of things were there. One was a lot of tooling and framework building that I did for Jill Watson. So Jill Watson used to answer questions on a certain forum, and then collecting those questions, building a pipeline to analyze them and stuff like that. I did a lot of that. Then later in the second semester, we worked on trying to understand how can we better classify the questions Jill Watson was getting into different categories. So that was more of a classification problem, and that's when I got acquainted to. I had heard of BERT and all these models, but that's when I actually started working on BERT and other, like, distill BERT, other NLP LM models. So that was my experience at DI Lab, and then in the third semester, actually, I had a lot of courses to take, so I couldn't do research. But again, I joined back in my fourth semester. This time I worked with Professor Srijan Kumar, who had recently joined Georgia Tech, and he had an amazing research experience with him. So, so again, I just approached him for that special problems thing I mentioned. And at that point, I was honestly like, I'm okay with whatever work there is, because all his work was interesting. And I wanted to, like, finally get a paper out or something. So I'm like, I'm ready to work. Like, just tell me what project. So
Yeah.
I can speak more about this later. But that's when I started working with Srijan Kumar, which actually led to, like, a paper in the end.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Again, like, I have a question here which was asked by one of my batchmates again. So, like you
sure,
said, like in a third semester, you were taking up courses. So I'm pretty sure like you must be having some or the other academic projects at that time, and then or
right,
what like you had them, right? And then in
yeah,
your fourth semester, you again shifted to your research. But then there are
hmm.
times there may be times. I'm sure you must be like experiencing that or have experienced that where there is a clash between working on research and then working on projects. So I got this question, like ask him like how do you keep your academic projects and your research time sort of separate, and how do you balance the research part and the implementation part of which can be same, which can be different?
That's a great question. And every semester I've had a research with a professor, I've always had projects. So one thumb rule I followed at Georgia Tech was to take more courses with projects instead of exams, because I think I learn better with projects, and the exam stress is
That's
just
great.
too
Yeah.
much. Already you're so stressed in grad school. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want like even more stress. Um, so how did I manage? There weren't any projects that overlapped with my research, so that demarcation was pretty clear. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that for when I was working with professors for the research, it was just me working on a problem with them. So it was just the both of us working on something. So I used to have weekly meetings, brainstorming my current updates and stuff like that.
Correct.
So that was a very more internalized, very sort of singular journey for me. Um, but when you work on projects with on courses, you're working with your peers and
Peers. Yeah.
your
Exactly.
classmates, right? So that is very
Yeah.
different. So that's when you learn things like, of course, teamwork and all, but like you learn how other people think, how they navigate projects, uh,
Exactly.
and yeah, what are their strengths, what are your strengths, how can you complement these two, things like that. And
Correct.
regarding choosing projects for academic courses, that has a lot to do with like other people's opinions also, like in terms of like your teammates opinions, what they want to do. So I
Yeah.
think that is more of a collective thing where you come together and decide what you want to do.
Correct.
But I think one in most of the groups that I worked with, we always had this in mind that, oh, this project we'll hope to convert it to a paper.
Yeah.
And although I did several projects in Georgia Tech, only one of them actually became a paper later. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but we always went with that aim, and the professors also always encouraged that, no, if this can be a paper, that will be amazing. So that was
Yeah.
one sort of thumb rule that we followed. Yeah,
Got it. And then, like you mentioned, that you were in your fourth semester and then you got back to research, right? So, did you have a thought of should I pursue a PhD ahead or should I get into like research, but in a like applied research formats kind of jobs in the job market? Like, how did you navigate
right.
between adding a PhD further, or do you plan on doing a PhD a few years down the line now, or how are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, again, that's a very well timed question, because this is exactly when I was so between my second semester and third semester, I had an internship with IBM Research. So,
Yeah.
so now let's look at a couple of things, right? So far I had worked in an academic setting in PhD in labs of professors and PhD folks. So that was a very interesting research setting. But when I went to IBM Research, it was research for industry, and that functions like it functions pretty differently than academic research. There, there's more focus on first research, but you need to like there's a commercial aspect to a lot of things. And you can't be completely exploratory in this. You need to like also keep in mind that people are paying you so much for this, and the
Yeah. Yeah.
company has shareholders to answer to. So
Yeah.
so all those things were there. um, and I discovered so many interesting things. Like a lot of conferences have industry tracks where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like the acceptance rate can be a bit high, because not many people are perhaps applying for those conferences and stuff like that.
Confidence.
So
Mm-hmm.
so by the time I came in my third semester, I had two different experiences: industry research and academic research. And that's when I actually started thinking very heavily about doing a PhD. This was in my third semester.
Got it. Hmm.
But having experienced this world, I had also realized how uncertain this world can be. Besides, when you're in grad school, you are in so much contact with people who are actually doing a PhD then, right? So if you have
Yeah. Yeah.
friends who are doing a PhD, you have like deep personal first-hand insight into what goes on in their lives. So 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 there were a couple of things. One was like, of course, like there was a lot of uncertainty. I knew that if I choose this path, it will be a very a sort of a journey with just me, right? When you're in a company, there are so many frameworks to take care of you, but in a
Exactly.
PhD, it's like a at least I think it's a very wild world. So it was a very singular journey, a lot of uncertainty. And more importantly, I was like, do I really have a topic or a field in mind in which I want to pursue a PhD in? Like, do I have a
Hmm.
strong
Yeah.
enough topic or a reason to do this? Or is it because I just like research, I should do a PhD? Is it supposed to be that direct? Um, and again, there are two things here. One is, of course, you can, and PhDs where you actually explore and learn to do research also, right? So you can very well go into a PhD not knowing exactly what you want to do. I know so many people who have pivoted their PhDs midway in terms of their research problem statements and stuff. So that's always there. But I wanted to have that clarity at least while getting into a PhD
Got it.
program.
Yeah.
So these were two things. And another thing was that because of certain reasons, my mental health was in complete shambles during that point. And I realized that if I go for a PhD, like I'll need to be, my mental fortitude needs to be extremely strong.
Yeah.
So at that point, because of all these three reasons, I was like, okay, let me like not like apply for a PhD right now, and maybe I can think of it later. But then I realized that when I worked at IBM Research and now when I work at Intel, I realized I can sort of do research in industry as well,
Mm-hmm.
get paid also like pretty well for it, and and I also realized that I like more of applied research than maybe perhaps
Yeah.
doing something extremely core.
Got
I
it.
might like that also. I'm not sure, but at least that I realized that I can do sort of applied research also. So then I'm like, this sounds like a great option. So I was like, okay, I think I'll go for like more of industry research if I'm able to get those opportunities.
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes sense. Again, like I want to appreciate this thing that you have a very clear framework sort of a thing for taking decisions, right? So I mean, you, even while you're answering, you stated that it points like, this is one point, and in that you have again 2 points. So that's, these are the reasons why as to like I didn't go with that PhD. But again, one
Yeah.
question that I also want to ask here is that you must have seen a lot of Indian students, or have you seen them in the first place, who approach MS plus PhD, like they approach their higher education
Hmm.
in such a way. And what's your take on that? Like, how should students take that decision of MS or MS plus PhD, based on
Yeah.
your interaction
Yeah.
with those people and like, adding your experiences to it as well?
Sure. I actually, one of my closest friends at Georgia Tech, like he did a master's with me, and then he chose a PhD after that. Like they try to see if they really like this experience of working in academia. What all this entails. Am I ready for all of this? I think that's one thing. That's the one thing they approach this with. And the second thing is you
Got
try
it.
to build networks. You when you start working with a professor consistently, that solidifies your chances of working with them for a PhD so much more than a random person
Exactly.
applying from somewhere else in the world, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
correct.
Having said that, I learned this later that there is no guarantee that just because you've worked
Guaranteed.
with someone for 2 years, you will get a PhD admit from them. I used to feel that, oh, like, of course, like they know you now, like, why would they not take you? You've done so well, but that's not the case. Uh,
Got it.
so that's how they approach this. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that, that they also approach this knowing that they might not get into the same lab as they have done a master's in. So I have two of my closest friends, both are from, they were in IIT Bombay before this, and they came to Georgia Tech. Both of them sought the same option. Both of them worked in different labs for their masters. Both of them applied to the for PhD in the same lab. One got in, one did not.
Okay.
Like the professor told him frankly that, yeah, like we are not admitting you even though you've worked with us for 2 years. So, and it's not like he delivered some results, but it wasn't like he was a bad student or something. So it's great if people keep this in mind, that nobody really owes you everything.
And yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, so these are two close examples I have seen.
Yeah, pretty solid again. Like, two examples
Yeah.
talking about two different scenarios. Got it,
Yeah.
got it, got it. Yeah, one question that I had in mind was, can you explain more about academic research and applied research in detail? Because I don't think a lot of people have that exposure as well. So it's like, I mean, this again comes later during your master's or something, but at least like students
Sure.
from undergrad also have an idea about it. I think that would be great.
Right. I think academic research or non-applied research entails uh, building conceptual blocks for people to later apply, basically. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I'll give you an example. So, I worked at IBM Research as a research intern in the summer, right? So, there we were doing time series analysis and stuff, and we like published a post in a conference and stuff like that. Now, that is research. But what were we researching? We were researching optimization opportunities for IBM staffing system, basically. So that's not a research problem of time series, basically, right? It's a research problem,
Yeah.
perhaps of organizational or industrial engineering. So we were applying a research for which has already been done in time series and readily take uh, those solutions
Concepts.
out of the box and apply them to a different domain. So that
Correct.
is, I would say, what is applied research. And academic, like non-applied research, is like coming up with transformers or things like that, basically.
Yeah. So
And
like 0 to
yeah,
1 sort of a thing.
yeah, correct. Yeah.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, coming to the, do you have anything to add, or like, should we sort of come to the conclusion of the podcast talking about your current experience in Intel and how's that
Intel.
working out for you, and all those things?
Um, yeah, we can. If you have any questions about like finding internships and stuff like that, I can like speak a bit about that. Like I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
something interesting to add. So I'm someone
sure.
who's not a fan of lead code. Okay,
Uh-huh.
like I don't like that whole system. So another incentive for me to apply for research roles, especially during job search and internship search, was that lead code is, at least in my experience, it's not that lead code heavy. Like, of course, they'll ask you coding and they'll need to know if you can solve problems, but it wasn't that lead code intensive. So I was very happy applying for research internships and research jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing about like internships, if someone is looking to understand how research hiring works.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah,
something that's not talked about a lot. Like I said, like there's no clear path out there as to how do you do this, or it
yeah,
might be there. I'm not aware because on YouTube I mostly
sure,
see talking about like software engineering jobs and so on. But I think this is something
right,
that's completely new. And yeah, one question
right.
that I wanted to ask that we also had a discussion about on call, like what was the difference between the IIT graduates or NIT BITS graduates coming to for their masters, for their research, and you coming from VIT, which is sort of a 1.5 or a tier 2 institute in India,
Tier two,
you
right.
coping up with them? Yeah, then how did you cope up, and how was that experience like?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because this was a very a big revelation to me in terms of my exposure and my growth and stuff like that. So, as you mentioned, when I came to Georgia Tech, most of the folks there were from BITS, IIT, and NIT, especially BITS and IIT. And like I remember very vividly, like I had come in on like for second week of August or something, and within 2 weeks people were discussing internships, resumes, referrals, and I was like, guys, we just came here, like let us have some time to breathe. But no, like what had happened is, uh, because I didn't have such a strong alumni network, and perhaps that's my fault that I did not build those relations. But in many of these tier one colleges like BITS and IITs, they have a very very strong network of alumni and just peers in general. Like I remember very well that my roommate in Georgia Tech, my first year roommate, he was the head of a club in BITS Goa, which which is a club dedicated to helping you write SOPs or LORs and like basically your master's application. I'm like,
Oh,
you have a club for that, and like this guy heads it. Like imagine the help they must be getting.
exactly.
Because I remember writing my SOP completely on my own. Like sometimes touch would like somebody like that SOP, but I like the only people who saw my SOP was me and the admissions committee. I did not even like show it to my friends
Hmm.
for advice or something. So I'm like, here there are people helping them, and which is great. Like we should all help each other. Like I love this fact. So so when I heard that, like that was like a big revelation. And I spoke of referrals, right? So the internship season comes as soon as you enter grad school. Like in September you have career fairs, and I realized that all these folks, they have they have connections in every company and they can use those referrals. And now
Hmm.
I have like perhaps a good network, I can say so. But at that time I did not know many people in different companies, so I had to go with the normal route, or the only option was to cold email random people and ask for referrals, which can be extremely tedious.
Yeah.
And another thing was, you like we have been talking about how to take decisions regarding research, regarding doing a PhD and stuff like that. So I coined this term myself. I call it information privilege. Basically, like when I came into Georgia Tech, I did not even know of like all these options. Uh, like I later came to know that, oh, like you can convert your MS to a PhD if you work with a professor and stuff like that. So
Got
like
it. Got it.
a lot of people from Taiwan colleges, like, they knew that there are these 10 options, and all they had to do was to put in the work to achieve the ones they want to choose to achieve.
Correct, correct.
I did not even know what options could be there. Like, whenever I found out of a new option, I'm like, acha, like, even this is an option. So I did not have a lot of information, and I'm
Yeah,
not saying that it's because of VIT being a certain college or something, perhaps because I did not put in that much effort to, like, actually find out that information. But I would be lying if I say that the having systems in place really helps, if
yeah,
you,
yeah.
because you are in that system, right? You get to know just by sheer virtue of being in that system and being connected to
Exactly.
those people. So
Yeah,
this
no, I can
information privilege
relate to
is,
this. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Information privilege is something I really encountered a lot, and I'm glad I did. Like, now I like
yes,
like what to do if I need to achieve certain goals. Like, I know that there are people who know much more than I do, and like, we need to, like, get up to
exactly.
their level. Yeah.
Exactly. So the awareness and exposure that eventually leads to directed hard work, like you said, like being just simply being aware of that, these 10 options exist and I want to choose from it,
Right.
sort of directs your hard work in a better way. Plus the fact that you
Correct.
have a wider network again is in a way giving you mentorship, big or like opportunities and something. So again, even that's
Right.
directed hard work in some sense. So like you said, information privilege is again a pretty interesting term. I would like
Yeah.
to write about it, thinking more about it, and writing about it in my
Sure.
blog or newsletter or something. It's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
term, and I mean
Yeah.
people should be aware about this. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moving to the final part of the podcast, right?
Sure.
About your experience at Intel, would you like to talk more about it in detail?
Sure. So after I graduated from Georgia Tech, I worked at, as I said, I wasn't the best at, like, lead code and stuff. And that sort of came back to bite me. So I applied for a lot of places. I did not get, I used to go to the final round and stuff, but did not really get selected.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the great fortune of working at NCR, which was in Atlanta. And I remember my time at NCR with the utmost fondness today, because the teammates I had, I really love them. They're amazing people. So I worked at NCR for 1.5 years, and there I did classic mainstream cutting edge software development. Like, we use Java, Spring Boot, Kubernetes, and everything that the
Yeah,
world is doing right now for software development. But again, I was like, I want to, like, get back to at least applied research, if not research. And if not now, like, when is the time to experiment and take risks, right? Because, like, I don't have a lot of responsibilities right now.
correct.
So I was like, maybe this is the time I can actually do this. And then I was contacted by Intel for a role on LinkedIn, and I applied for it, and I interviewed and stuff, and I got into Intel. And I can't speak much about what we exactly do at Intel right now, but I can say that right now I'm into something completely different from what I've done before. So I'm into distributed computing, and we are trying to understand how can we optimize graph neural networks system pipelines. So graph neural networks is when you do deep learning or ML on graph or network data sets. And and so this is about ML systems again. It's not about GNNs themselves. Like, we are not researching GNNs, but we're researching the systems in which they work. So
Yeah,
this has a lot to do with high performance computing and distributed computing. Yeah. So this is my current work.
got it. So one more
Yeah.
thing that I would love to add here is that, right? So I have had interactions with a lot of students who are pursuing their higher education, or they are
Right.
somewhere like 5 to 7 years ahead of me in their career, and especially the people that I've had on the podcast, right? So they're doing something amazing in their careers, and I get to have these exchanges with them. So one thing I realized quickly, and one thing I realized after interacting with everyone is that they are very quick learners because they are able to get to the first principles really well. Like you said, right? Whatever
Hmm.
you were working right now, whatever you are working right now is completely different from what you worked on before. So the
Right.
approach of learning, right? I think this is something that's covered in Carl Newport's deep work also, right? The ability to learn things quickly by getting
Yeah.
down to the first principles. I think
Yeah.
everyone on the podcast, everyone who I've had on the podcast, right, they learn things pretty quickly and they shed their previous roles or previous attachments with a particular domain or topic very quickly. That is something that I would want to implement when I come there as a student, and take it ahead from that. That's something that I've learned from you guys.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the ruts people fall into is trying to like look at all these tutorials and like YouTube videos and stuff. And
Exactly.
I have learned the hard way that honestly, like just start doing something, because you will
Yeah.
encounter errors and roadblocks. And when you try to search for answers, you will learn something, right? So
Yeah.
of course there are tutorials to guide you, but don't spend time in like sitting for hours and like trying to just soak in information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because when
So
you actually start doing things, you get stuck so bad that you have to shed that older attachments of, oh, I like this, I like that, research
exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Can relate.
Yeah.
Can relate. Can relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything more that you want to add, or like as we are at the end of the episode right now, it's been around 1 hour 4 minutes since we are shooting.
Yeah.
Time passed by very quickly, very insightful.
Yeah.
So, is there anything more that you would want to add?
No, not really. I think you have asked great questions, honestly. Like, they are so well curated and so comprehensive. And again, like, the motive behind them was also so noble that, like, people can especially students can gain something out of it. So
Yeah.
I think you took all the heavy lifting, so I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much. No, I mean, that's something that we've been doing on the podcast for the last 2 years, right? Like, I
Yeah.
see a lot of my batchmates, my juniors, trying to figure out stuff. I myself am trying to figure out stuff. Honestly, everything that I figured out in my career, and now that I'm trying to pursue a higher education, I've submitted my applications, waiting for my results. So
Yeah.
everything that I've learned, everything that I've gained clarity about is through these podcasts, right? So if I'm learning from you, I believe that should be passed on to the juniors and to the people around me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been a great session. It's been a great session.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking about this, and this is my first time like actually being a guest on a podcast. So this was a lot of fun, and thank you so much to you for making it
Thank
so
you.
easy, seamless, and creating an environment where I could totally like speak properly and feel safe. Yeah.
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 Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the episode. If you found it valuable, I kindly ask you to share it with others who may benefit from it. I highly recommend subscribing to our channel and exploring our other podcasts, all designed to support the student community out there. Additionally, make sure to visit the description for important links that will connect you with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Wishing you a wonderful day ahead. Regards, Beyond Conversations, IEEE Pune section.